I realized as a principal, my teacher leaders were passionate about the work, but they had a hard time actually leading their colleagues. Leading adults is very different than leading children. They had a hard time convincing their colleagues. There was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of resistance. And my teacher leaders, although they bought into the work, they hadn't been trained on how to actually lead, how to have tough conversations, how to deal with resistors. They just didn't have that skill set. So we pivoted.
You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, George Valenzuela.
This is education coach George Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it.
We're here today with Dr. Jasmine Kullar. Jasmine is a Chief School Leadership Officer for the Cobb County School District in Georgia. She has a big job, y'all. She oversees over 100 schools. Woo, that's a lot. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Tell us how you got into that role.
First, thank you for having me. I actually was not really wanting to be a teacher ever or get into education. That was never what I wanted to do. My whole life, I wanted to be a police officer. That was what I was going to do. I was going to get into
I never heard that one before.
Since I was 5 years old. In kindergarten, they ask you what do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, it's police officer. And that never changed every year. That's all I wanted to do was be a police officer. So when I graduated high school, went into university, I actually majored in criminology. So that was my major. Shortly after that, I won't get into the whole story of my very short-lived police career. It did not last very long. From there, I actually ended up getting a job working with young adults, young students who had been involved with the law, and they were in a juvenile detention center. And I would go in and I would teach these kids how to write a resume, how to interview, and just teach them how to get a job. And from there, I realized I really enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed being in front of kids. I enjoyed helping kids. So then I went back to school, got my degree in education, and became a teacher. And from there, moved my way up, became a principal and assistant superintendent, and now in the role that I'm currently in.
Hey, y'all. She's being really humble. I read through her book. I've had a chance to speak to her. And this lady right here is an instructional leader. She's the personification of instructional leadership and how to develop and how to grow teachers, which I care a lot about. And she's also the author of this amazing book. It's called Training Teacher Leaders in a PLC at Work, A Guide to Cultivating Shared Leadership. It's through Solution Tree. Jasmine, what inspired you to focus on developing teacher leaders, specifically within the PLC model?
It really started from when I was a first-year principal and the experience I had. I was very much a believer in the PLC work. I was very lucky enough that I got introduced to it when I was a brand new teacher. When I became a principal, I was like, okay, I'm the principal of this building and whatever I say is going to happen and we're going to move forward with this PLC work. And I learned very quickly that's not how you lead. Very quickly, I learned that there's no way one person cannot lead a school and expect to get the results that I was wanting to get, that you have to do it together in collaboration with teacher leaders. Especially at the time, I hadn't been in the classroom for quite a long time because I'd gotten out of the classroom. I was an assistant principal for some time, then a principal. And the further you go from the classroom, I think it's even more important why you have to have your teachers involved because they're still in the trenches. I took a team of 13 teacher leaders to a PLC Institute in Orlando. My goal was to get them to really buy into this process and buy into this concept. And I was hoping they would come back super excited to help me lead this work. Well, that worked. By day 2, they were all in. I wasn't even talking. I wasn't even trying to sell them on it. They were all like, oh, we can do this. We can do this. And I'm the one saying, okay, slow down. I know you guys are excited about it. They were so excited. We had chart paper everywhere. We created our whole vision, our plan, what we were going to do. They were all in. And I was so excited and super confident that we're going to go back and we're going to just change our school and we're going to get on the map as a professional learning community. I'm very excited about it when we came back with the teacher leaders. Unfortunately, none of that happened. None of it. We came back with our plans. They did a really good job trying to sell the work to their colleagues. I realized as a principal, my teacher leaders were passionate about the work, but they had a hard time actually leading their colleagues. Leading adults is very different than leading children. They had a hard time convincing their colleagues. There was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of resistance. And my teacher leaders, although they bought into the work, they hadn't been trained on how to actually lead, how to have tough conversations, how to deal with resistors. They just didn't have that skill set. So we pivoted, and I ended up saying, all right, we're going to put the PLC work on hold just for a minute. And we really started working on training the teacher leaders on their leadership skill set. And that was a game changer. Once we did a lot of that training with building their leadership skill set, I felt like I gained 14 assistant principals, because that's how they were operating. When you have that many leaders in a building, it changed our school.
If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors.
Education is changing. Classrooms look different, and the future demands that our students be equipped for whatever comes their way. Educators play a huge role in helping prepare students for their futures. Defined Learning is a K-12 standards-aligned PBL solution that provides high-quality cross-curricular performance tasks across content areas such as ELA, math, science, social studies, computer science, and more. The hands-on projects are based on real-world situations and allow students to apply their learning. Education is changing. Give students the tools and experiences to recognize their futures and make an incredible impact on the world. Defined, the authority on applied learning.
We had the pleasure of listening to George this morning on project-based learning, and he shared his story that his aunt encouraged him to go into education. And she was absolutely right. He is so talented at sharing information in a way that is easy to digest and is inspiring to go back and actually implement and make change.
So my takeaway is that Mr. Valenzuela was very inspiring. He was very motivational and helped me to think about a new way of getting my teachers excited.
When I set out to do a workshop, my key deliverable is energy. And this momentum is used to make connections, inspire, educate, and ultimately transform the audience, so that they're compelled to take that same energy back to their schools and communities. And although we have fun, we tackle the hard topics of today, like educational policy, pedagogy for improving curriculum and instruction, and empowering today's students by connecting our work to the needs of the workforce. So please consider Lifelong Learning Defined for your next keynote, workshop, or conference, and overall instructional and educational coaching needs. My name is George, and I hope to connect with you soon.
We would love to have him come and do some work with us and help us be a little more successful and help our students to be more successful.
I do want to come back to teacher leaders and their qualities, but I want to say, were resistant colleagues the main hurdle, the main obstacle in implementing PLC work?
I've been a principal in 2 different schools. My very first school, yes, resistance was the biggest obstacle. In my second school, taking initiative was the big obstacle.
Yeah.
All of us are rule followers, and they were very much just tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it.
And that doesn't work that way, because you don't really understand what you're telling me to do. So then you're doing it blindly, and it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember talking to my ELA department chair, and I said, listen, your department better than I do. I haven't taught in forever, and I never taught ELA. You as the ELA department chair, you tell me, what do you think needs to happen in your department? What do you think needs to happen in your ELA program? And just even speaking that way, this is your department. These are your ELA teachers. ELA is yours. What do you want to see happen? And how can I help and support you? Those kinds of conversations is what was really changing their mindset of you are the leader of your department, and I'm here to support you to make whatever it is that you want to see happen in your department.
Jasmine, you wrote the book. I know that you fully understand this. In your book, you have the top 10 key skills and qualities you believe are essential for effective teacher leadership. Can you talk about courage for a moment?
Yeah.
Why is courage so important?
Courage is really how to have those tough conversations with your
Mm.
colleagues. Like I said, these are people that you're friends with. These are people that you probably have had relationships with. Having the courage to do the right thing, having the courage to do what's best in the interest of our students, that takes courage, because it's almost easier to stay quiet and not say anything when you see a colleague do something. An example I would share is we always have teachers in every school where you're having a bad day. And some teachers maybe have more bad days where it's just everything just is awful. Parents are awful, the principal's awful. I mean, everyone's just awful. So as a teacher leader, if you're having a conversation with a teacher next door to you and this teacher is just going on and on about how there's so much stress, there's so much pressure, and the kids and the parents and that, and just as a teacher leader, what do you say?
Yeah.
Typically, a traditional teacher leader will perhaps nod and join in, or just say, yeah, I understand, I hear you.
But what they don't understand in that moment is that a lot of times that person that is always complaining, not the one that vents,
Correct.
right? That person really doesn't want collaboration. They want collusion.
Yes.
That's what they want. That's what they
Yep.
want.
Yep. And you as a teacher leader, you're doing that. So as a traditional teacher, fine. But a teacher leader, what kinds of conversation do you have with that teacher who you know is just negative? We did a lot of those kinds of role playing and training in terms of how do you have those conversations? Because to your point, that takes courage to do that. It's easier to just say, I hear you, I agree, I know. It's easier to do that. But it takes courage to really try to address the problem, which feels this way. Yeah.
What would be another skill that you would say right after courage would be the most important thing? Which is that skill?
I would say problem solving. There's a quote, it's not mine, but I'll share because I reference it quite a bit, is when you have a school filled with problem solvers, you won't have a morale issue in your building.
Wow. That's a good one.
So if you think about it, typically morale issues happen because there's all these little problems happening throughout your school.
Mm-hmm.
And either people are waiting for the principal to come out and solve them. If that's the case, you're going to be waiting a long time because as the principal, it's just me. It's just one person. I may or may not even know that there's a problem in the biology department or there's an issue in the 6th grade hallway. I may not even know. Whereas if you have teacher leaders, true teacher leaders who are acting in that leadership capacity, and they're obviously spread out throughout the building, one of their jobs is if there's a problem in that biology department, fix it. There's a problem in the 6th grade hallway, fix it. So you have all these problems that come up in all these different departments, but if teacher leaders have been trained on being problem solvers and then problems are being solved as they come up, your morale issue really tends to go down, in my opinion.
And now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to communicate better and even deal with social emotional stuff. They're having a bad day, a SmartLab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab. I move around a lot of schools, and we're seeing a huge disconnect. A lot of teachers that have come from non-traditional pathways, especially in the past few years. And so just interactions, expectations is really the first step. All of my teachers, raise your right hand, and please repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my students. All of my administrators, all my directors, all
all my principals, all my coordinators, raise your hands, please, your right hand, and repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my faculty and staff. Thank you.
Is there a job description for a teacher leader?
Yeah, that's a problem because there's not. I've worked with hundreds of districts across the country and I have not seen one yet. That's an obstacle, a big one to teacher leadership is we don't take the time to really explain what the job of a teacher leader is. A lot of times as principals, hey, I need you to be my science department chair, or I need you to be the third grade team leader, or whatever that might be. You get the title, but you really don't know what it is that you're supposed to do. So you end up going back to whatever the person before you did, which in a lot of times, and I share this as an example when I present with teacher leaders, is that traditional role, which is regurgitating what the principal told me. So a traditional teacher leadership meeting, teacher leaders will come in with their yellow notepads, take all these notes that the principal's telling them, and then they leave that leadership meeting and they go have a meeting with their department, and all they're doing is, hey, the principal told me to tell you we can't do this anymore. The principal told me to tell you we now have to start doing this. It's a regurgitation of what the principal said.
And that just makes that middle person be hated and the principal be hated. So
Exactly.
it doesn't really work.
Exactly. So step one is we got to establish a role. So one of the first things I did with my teacher leadership team is that's not your job. I don't need you speaking for me. If I want to tell something to the staff, I'm going to tell them myself. I need you to lead with me. So we talked about what that means. So what is the role? So we actually created the job description together where we put specific duties and responsibilities for the teacher leaders in our building. And then we shared it with the whole staff. So it's not a secret. The whole staff knows what the job is of a teacher leader in our school. And the duties and responsibilities were very specific to leading their departments as opposed to just advocating for teachers, because their core job is to advocate for the students in their department.
Every district leader, every school leader wants teacher leaders. But many of them don't know how to cultivate them. And you are the expert. How can school leaders help create this culture of shared leadership among teachers, but in the spirit of collaboration?
I will tell you that to me is the most important thing any leader can do. You cannot lead by yourself. I don't know if you ever could, but I know for sure you definitely cannot. You need leaders with you. Like I said, when we started this journey of training our teacher leaders, it really was like I got 14 more assistant principals in my school. That's how they were leading.
Wow.
Principals might not want to hear it, but one of the first steps, I think principals need to reflect on their leadership style. Because if you as a principal are a control freak, it's going to be hard for you to embrace the shared leadership concept. So I know the word sounds great and it's easy to throw that word around, but as a principal, you really have to do some self-reflection and think about what does it mean for me to not be the only leader, and I want to have 15 leaders with me so that as a leadership team, we are all leading this work together. So first, I think the principal needs to do some self-reflection on their leadership style.
And I just want to drop a couple nuggets here. There's two things that just popped into my head. Number one, John Dewey said, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. And Principal Kafele says this all the time. You got to hold the mirror up to your face and you have to reflect. Reflection is one of the most important things, not just leaders in schools, teachers, students, parents. Everyone needs to reflect on their beliefs, on their actions, on their behaviors, and on their practice. Jasmine, what a perfect way to end the show. How can people find you so they can book you to speak at their conference, school, or event?
You can find me on Solution Tree's website and we can go from there.
And I'll be sure to put that link in the show notes. That's it for this episode. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast.
Thank you.
Whether you're a teacher or administrator, you lead by walking alongside your students and your staff. You teach them what to do. You model for them. Let's say you're in a situation where you don't know what to do and you bring in a coach or a resource, you learn alongside them. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the second thing is this. Give your people feedback, not pushback. Whoever you push back on, whether physically or verbally, they're going to do it right back immediately. And if they're intimidated by our position, our status, they're going to do it behind our backs and ruin our programs. My guy. I want to leave you on this note. Trajectories can be changed. When I was in 10th grade, here's a snapshot of who I was in 10th grade. There's a rapper named Rakim. I'm not sure if you guys know about Rakim, but he used to say, it's not where you're from, it's where you at. And I played that on my headphones at 16 years old every day until I believed it. And I'm showing you this because I'm seeing versions of this throughout American schools. This is your reality of what you have to face. If I can do it, any kid can do it, but they have to work hard. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with Jorge Valenzuela.